Daoan. How? Thank you very much indeed, Anthony, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you also, Warren Chen, Vice Chairman, for inviting me here to share with you today. And thank you all of us for coming on this Friday morning to hear how we can help to develop the design in Taiwan and in China. You'll see as we go through it that Nordic design is not really Nordic in that it's part of a geographical place. It's more a way of thinking. And there are many, many parallels between what happens in Scandinavia and what can happen also in Taiwan. So it's worthwhile looking at the elements which have changed design in Scandinavia. I was invited to talk about the evolution and trends of Nordic design. And I don't usually talk about that because normally in Europe, people know about the evolution and trends. So it was also a challenge for me to try and get into my own roots and say, why do we think the way we do and why do we have the results that we have? So let's go quickly on. I don't have a lot of time. But what is Scandinavia? Scandinavia is the red countries you see. It's Denmark at the bottom, which is where I come from. It's a very small country. Do I have a pointer here? This little part here is Denmark. And then we have a very large, long country with only 4 million people called Norway, and then Sweden. And these three countries are Scandinavia. But many people also link Finland and Iceland with it. But you notice the shape of Denmark. It's almost completely surrounded by water. It's almost an island. And Copenhagen, which is the capital, is really on an island right in the middle here. So the country shape similarities between Taiwan and Denmark are very close. And that's important for the next scene here. Because I start talking about Scandinavian design down on the beach. That's an important place. The sky, the light, the simplicity of the beach, the nature, the closest of nature have all inspired the way we think about creating. Because the art of design is the art of putting things together within this picture. And everyone, I think all of the designers in Scandinavia are influenced by the nature and the society we find around us. So the colors of the beach, the colors of the grass, the colors of the sand, the emptiness of the beach are all important factors. We actually say in Denmark that the sky is very high today. And it's a strange thing because it does seem to be very high. And when I've said to people in Taiwan that the sky is not so high, they think I'm absolutely crazy. But somehow the color of the sky and the light and the way it comes down are important factors. I can see on your faces you think I'm talking nonsense. We're talking industrial design and I'm already down at the beach. But I can tell you it was, because we go into the forest. Scandinavian design became famous generally because of furniture in the 40s and in the 50s. But the art of the furniture comes from the purity of the materials which were used. A lot of the trees which are growing in Denmark are these beech trees. And this is just a normal forest which is close to my home. Very, very high trees, many meters high, very high quality wood. And so the type of detailing that comes from, which has made Scandinavian design famous, is using the wood in its most natural way. So although the shapes which were created in the furniture seemed to be complex shapes. It was making the wood do what wood does best. And that principle has applied to all the materials, whether it's plastics or aluminium or steel or wood. It's using understanding the material so that the material can express itself in the best way. A lot of the design also was actually, you'll see this kind of chair is common for Chinese old chair design. So a lot of the original Danish chair designers were greatly influenced by Japanese furniture and by Chinese furniture. And then they've filtered it through this idea of purity and using the materials properly to get an international design. These chairs here are ancient. They were designed in the 40s, but they're still used completely today. They're still on the market. They were designed by an architect who is now long dead. But you can see in this picture, taking the forces of nature, the structure of the waves, the movement the designer has put into the chairs. Look at the color of the sky now. In the autumn, it's a dull day, but there's lots of grays and white, and that's also transmitted into the colors being used. So a chair suddenly here is not in isolation. In the introduction, Anthony talked about it's not commercial design, it's not industrial design, it's integrated design. And here we've taken design not only is integrated across the disciplines, but integrated entirely into a lifestyle. So it matches the colors we see and so on. This is on the west coast of Denmark with the North Sea coming in from the UK. And I remember we employed a designer who came from a very small town on the west coast. She was a graphic designer. And every time we said, what colors do you think we should use here? She always said, light gray. And she said, no, everything can't be light gray. And she said, a nice pale blue. I said, try yellow. Yellow can't possibly be yellow. She's got her lifestyle, the way of her thinking was in these toned out shades. And it's interesting to see that the range of chairs which are being sold just now, very small changes in color bring in a range of chairs which are very popular. I think in terms of international design, you would think you should have a red chair and a blue chair and a yellow chair. But here they just play with different tones of grey. But if you go to Norway, the landscape changes. It's like in Taiwan, you go down from the beach, down from Hsinchu, down at the flat plains, and then suddenly up into the mountains. And as you know, people who live in mountains have got a different point of view, a different way of living, and a different relationship to nature. And it's very strange within the same region that you have such a difference in geography. It's cold, it's damn cold in Norway. The houses are isolated from nature. You get stronger colors, you get stronger forms, stronger shapes, more expressive shapes from Norwegian design. You see across here, this is quite normal for Norwegian design. They don't make grey chairs. They make bright red, bright orange chairs. Also, if we go back to Sweden, which is halfway between and very famous for a lot of design, you find this great expression. The big design brands from Sweden, like IKEA, for example, which also have branches here. They have taken the simplicity of the nature of Scandinavia and put it into commercial use, but also with a lot of stronger colors and stronger shapes. This is in this building here, twists round. I'm going to talk about this talk about this later. It's a way of taking, you could have built the building just straight up, but by twisting it round, you get quite a different effect of light and views from the buildings. And it's very much more expressive, although this was a Spanish architect. And Finland, I couldn't resist this. Finland is really, it's a country, but it's dominated by lakes and forests, and the lakes go in and out and in and out and in and out. And one of the most popular vases and shapes which have come from Finland are these in and out glass vases here, hugely popular and designed about 50 years ago, but still very modern. So you see modern shapes taken from nature, taken from the lifestyle of having respect for people and having respect for nature and the colors in which we live, give that kind of expression which rings a bell in Asia, which says something to Japanese people, says something to Chinese people. And of course Nokia, very strange, used to be number one in telecom and completely taken over by Samsung and by Apple, but probably because of interface alone. So I've made this compass for you. I did this for you today to try and understand what it is. This is like a compass, north, south, east, west, and in the center is the user, because I think one of the things about the whole thing about Scandinavia is the user is always right in the center. Even in a chair where no one is sitting there, you can actually see the person sitting in the chair. And so I added the ingredients. At the top you see craftsmanship. Denmark, if we go back 100 years ago or 200 years ago, no, just 100 years ago to 1900, Denmark was an agricultural country. It was actually quite a poor country in terms of European finance. But that meant that the craftsmen were still working with their crafts. So Denmark came quickly into an industrial age with a very high level of craftsmanship. And that is still today in working with all of the materials we have. And the next one round is the material. I think people in Scandinavia, they want to use, no matter what the material, we want to use the best material in the best way. If it's plastics, then it's got to be a good quality plastic and used in a way that suits plastic. If it's steel, if it's wood, and so on. And sometimes you can go from one material to the other and achieve much greater effect just by thinking about which material to use and when. And at the bottom, I hope you can see, is some geometric simplicity. In other words, can we bring everything back to a circle or a cylinder or a triangle? We sometimes have the motto in our design company that good design is when you cannot take anything else away. In other words, take away all of the unnecessary stuff and almost until it hurts. And I know when we started to work with Asian companies, that's very difficult because Asian companies want add-on, 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 extra value, and add-on, and cost down, cost down, cost down. And we were saying, take away, value up, value up, value up. So it is that dilemma between things. But as you'll see in the later examples, you'll see how it works. And the last one, of course, is aesthetics. Aesthetics is very important. Things have to look good. I think one of the things about Apple products is when they introduced them was they actually looked good and they felt good. And the aluminium was perfect. And the aesthetic quality is something which we should not ignore. And there's no other profession in the world which deals with aesthetics like the creative professions. There's no engineers, there's no economists, there's no one else chemists who deal with pure aesthetics as you guys can. So the fourth one is an important. But that's not the whole story. If that was it, that would be pretty damned easy. Overlaying that compass, we have got another compass, and this is the one I like. We've still got the user right in the middle, but towards, what would you say, northeast, we've got timelessness. One of the aspects of good timeless design is that a product, a chair, a telephone will stay on the market much longer than you would normally reckon with. I mean, we're talking about 25 years for a product on the market. And if you start to work out the costings of the tooling and so on in comparison to a product which stays on the market for 2 years, then the one that stays on the market much longer is of much greater commercial value than the short-term product. So timelessness means that things are in fashion all the time. The next one down at the bottom is difficult. The multi-layer design. I think when you see a really good product, it should not be completely obvious. There should be something say, aha, that's an interesting way to do that, or that's an interesting way to balance that. There should be something intellectually that really inspires you. And it's very difficult to put this into words, but as we go through the pictures, I think you'll be able to see what I mean. And it's linked very much to this one across here, and I hope the translation is okay here. I call it improbability. By improbability, I mean something that looks out of balance, that looks as if it's not quite right, but in fact it is right. It looks like a weak chair which is suddenly actually very strong, or an angle that looks as if it's going to fall over, but it doesn't fall over. It's part of the curiousness of design, that when it's man-made, it's like saying we understand nature and then we add an extra ingredient. I noticed when I was at the National Palace Museum looking at cups at Tang Dynasty, they had all of the cups before that were absolutely perfect because it took a long time to make the perfect cups, Chinese cups. But in the Tang Dynasty, they started to put imperfections into it. They wanted to say, yes, we can make it perfect, but now we're making it more human by adding an extra little detail into it. So I can see it's been happening in Asia before. And the last one here is human design. Very much the size, the function, looking at the human being, looking at the user. Does the user understand the technology? Does the technology understand the user? I think we've already proved that UX, the interface between the physical world and the technical world, is so important. It's a very important part of that design. Right. What's this? These are some old buildings, but it's worthwhile looking at this because you see, I think you can understand it exactly and straight away. This is just half-timbered buildings in Aarhus, which is on the mainland of Denmark. But you see, the structure of the building is made in wood, and in between the wood, they've used brickwork. But look at the pattern which has happened. They're using the structure of the wood to make a pattern, and there's actually no applied decoration at all. There's no flowers, there's no paintings on it, there's no pictures on it, there's no carving on it at all. The interest comes from the regular pattern of the structure. So here's the wood which is being used to hold the building up, and the actual strength of the building. The strength of the building is being used as part of the expressive design. And this goes all the way through. There's no decoration, I think, in Scandinavian design. Most of it's taken away down to the absolute simplest forms. And these forms, straight lines, diagonal lines, very little decoration. It goes through into many different aspects of it. Again, this looks like the guards that you would see in Buckingham Palace, but they're not. They're quite different. They've got this strange cross part here, which really isn't. It comes from the bags they used to hold, but it gives this coordination between the society. We've got old houses. We've got this pattern. Even the soldiers have got this pattern. It's a coordination which surprised me when we started to look at it. Also look at the color of the soldiers' trousers. That's kind of unusual. Light blue for soldiers' trousers. And light blue, I go on almost straight away to this part here of an old hotel room which was designed in 1950s. This is not modern design. This is very, very old design. But I know that these chairs are still being sold on the market as modern design. But look at the color that's being used and the color of the landscape up here. So you see the product is part of society, and it's part of the wider spectrum of the whole lifestyle. And you can do that also here. When you're looking for an Asian identity, it's not just the thing that's on your screen. It's the thing that's beside you when you're working. It's your family, it's your community, it's the neighborhood you live in, it's how close you are to the mountains, it's where you are with the light of the day. These shapes, of course, are very famous, and there are new designs which come along, but somehow the colors here from the 50s still appeal to us 60, 70 years later on, because it's part of the same substance. And this is an interesting aspect. Royal Copenhagen, China, is really a rip-off from Chinese porcelain. In Europe, we didn't know. When people started going to China first and trading, they couldn't understand how fine the porcelain was. How is this done? How did the Chinese do this? It took 200 years before the Germans found out how to make porcelain. And then when we started to make porcelain, we just copy-pasted the colors and the designs from this blue pattern here. This indigo is pure Asian culture being used in the West to produce very, very high-value porcelain. It costs quite a lot of money, and it's still hand-painted and so on. But you can see from the color, this dark blue, it's an Asian color. So it's taking impulses from Asia and making it into, I think most people in Denmark would say it's completely, typically Danish, this. But actually, it's mainly Asian. So again, the question is, when we're looking at how are we going to develop a LITE-ON design pattern, how are we going to express Korea or Taiwan as a design nation? It's not only thinking something completely new, which no one's ever seen before. It's taking some of the elements, the best elements from somewhere else in the world, and improving them in a Taiwanese way. And I know the strength of the people here can do this. It's possible, and it will work. Yeah, what else we have? I couldn't resist. I'm a grandfather. I lie on the floor. I build fire engines. That's very important. Lego, the Lego factory is about an hour's drive away from where I live. But I noticed with joy to see this postman's electric truck here in Norway. I think the guys who designed this, they've also played with Lego. It's almost a natural extension. Also, the helmet. We can't escape from our childhood, and if you play with Lego in your childhood, then you tend to think in these ways. But it's part of the, again, Scandinavian design is not just furniture and it's not just stainless steel things. It's also things like this. Lego probably culturally dominates more than any of the other Scandinavian cultural aspects. This is very strange. This is really strange in a design talk. Defense industry. What is design thinking? Design thinking is about thinking about the problem, thinking about the people using things, what are the situations, how can we improve it within the economy. Sweden is 13 million people, or 12 million people. That's like greater Taipei. And yet they have a very advanced defense industry, which they don't sell much outside. Sweden is a neutral country, so it doesn't take part in NATO, it doesn't take part in Russia. But to be neutral, you have to be quite strong. It sounds a little bit like Taiwan. But they design their own defense, knowing what's going to happen. So these very advanced aircraft here, which actually is a better bargain than the Joint Strike Fighter from Boeing, they are built to land anywhere on roads and so on. They know that within 5 minutes of a war, all the airfields will be bombed. So the aircraft are designed not to need airports. This wonderful ship here is a stealth ship. This funny shape here in the front, this is the gun turret. And once they fire a gun, the gun actually comes out because it reflects radar. So the gun comes out and then shoots and goes back again. It's design thinking as to how to create something which they regard as necessary for Sweden. And it's quite different from the way the Americans do it, it's quite different from the way the Europeans do it, and it's quite different from the way the Russians do it. And the colors and so on. The idea of what design is goes all the way, so from flower pots to warships. And it's that strength which you can harness. Volvo, I know the cars went bankrupt and it's bought by the Chinese, but the design department and the manufacturer is still in Gothenburg. It's part of the design industry, part of the strength. And once again, you know that Volvo, if you say Volvo brand, you know it's about protection of the passengers, protection of the driver. It's about safe driving. It's not really about stylish. It's not Italian design. It's not look at me design. It's human design, keeping people safe, taking the kids to school, getting where you want to go, and so on. And now I see that the computer systems, the electronic systems are looking for threats, looking for cyclists, and so on. So that's a little bit of the evolution. Now I'm just taking the evolution slowly up into the future changes. There are huge changes, visible changes about sustainability. And being so far north, there's lots of wind. So wind power, especially wind and water power, is changing the energy use. But as it does so, it changes the way people think about moving themselves also. So more people are using public transport, and a lot of people are using bicycles. And for old people, they use electric bicycles generally from Asia, and normal people go by bike. In our design company, we always put the design offices in the center of the city, and I think there's no one comes to work on a car. Everyone comes to work where I work, in my office. Everyone comes either by public transport or by cycle. It's as simple as that. So it's sustainability, the way houses are built. Most of the houses being built now are zero energy, which means that they're not using anything at all external. The houses heat themselves from sunlight and so on. And the other trend I kind of like, this is the Prime Minister. You won't believe it. And this is the Queen, this old lady here. Another trend is gender equality. Warren Chen told me when we had dinner that I think 2/3 of all the buildings in Taipei are owned by women. So something also is happening. But it's quite interesting to see European power led entirely by women. And here we have Cameron, who is the Prime Minister of UK, and someone else. But it's interesting to see they're taking a selfie. And that's something else to do with the way we're going, because as we move into a much more equal gender, we find that women in the workplace are changing the workplace, changing the way companies are thinking. We noticed within 20 years, as more men stayed at home and more men did cooking and so on, the design of kitchens was entirely changed to something completely different, perhaps a little bit clinical. This is a kind of typical kitchen, a very large kitchen. They've made generally dining rooms and kitchens so that it's a functional room for all of the family. But gender equality is not just about rights. Gender equality goes through all of the aspects. What are the objects we use in the kitchen? What are the objects we use in our daily lives? All of these things almost were redesigned because of a change in social structure. So things which do things as a function only usually get replaced by things which have a meaning. The other aspect is we're all getting old. This is a rock festival, which was just before I left, and it was some of the bands from the 90s. And the surprising thing for the arrangers was that 30% of the people who came to the rock concert were over 60. So we've got this mixture, but as society gets old and the youth, the time of people being young is extended, so that childhood is very short, youth is very long, and then you've got a much longer active life, meaning double careers and so on, and having quite a different sort of pension life to what we expect is exactly the same in Taiwan with more and more old people. But the whole idea of the electronics, the products, everything for this group of people changes also. The other trends commercially is that we see that Scandinavian countries aim at being global brands. They want to produce global products with a global brand. And that means, what kind of ambition does the leadership have? And once again, I bring Lego. It's a toy maker, but everyone knows it. It's been able to reach USA and Asia, and I guess everyone here knows it. It's probably one of the few products that everyone knows. We always think when we think innovation and we think new things, we think of apps and we think of smartphones. But in actual fact, the other products which we have beside ourselves in our lifestyle are just as important. Hennes & Mauritz is another example from Sweden. They, as just one company, they have more revenue than the entire fashion industry of Denmark. It's a huge company and influences and listens carefully to what the customers want in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, and so on. Although it started just as a normal Swedish company. Skype was originated in Denmark and later bought over by Microsoft, and that's why it doesn't work anymore. And now we all use, what do we use here? Line. Line is much better. Much better icons. IKEA, of course, bringing the idea of inclusive, good design. I think the whole idea of IKEA is like Scandinavian design. It's inclusive, it's affordable. You can get it easily. It doesn't cost a lot of money, but it's thoughtful and it's good design. And sometimes you think, it's just a bit too cheap or too simple. That's okay, but it means that you can reach out the world. They don't make a lot. The profit margin on each product is very small because there are many products and they sell a lot. But they've been able to bring good design to millions and millions of people. And really, they've been able to do a kind of universal design because the kind of product which is popular in Scandinavia, in London, in Munich, is also popular in Kaohsiung and Shanghai. And then, perhaps a word of warning. We talked about craftsmanship. In Northern Europe, robot production is very, very popular because it's so precise. It matches the idea of very high craftsmanship. A lot of robots are made in Scandinavia. So a lot of companies are using robot. Also, the wage levels in Scandinavia are quite high by your standards. So is the taxation, but the wages are quite high. So it's worthwhile to use robots in production. But robots in Scandinavia cost exactly the same as robots in China. The cost of buying a robot is the same. So a lot of production is moving back again from Asia to Scandinavia. A lot of production is moving from the low-cost areas to the high-precision areas. And something that is worthwhile remembering, that low cost alone is of less importance than it was 2 years ago and 5 years ago. And then the traditional brands. These are old designs. Your left is Bang & Olufsen speakers. They almost went bankrupt, taken over by Samsung and by LG and so on, but have been able to renew their designs and now are not quite so bad. Jakob Jensen, George Jensen, you know, and lighting, probably most designers know here. This sort of thing here, this is what I talk about, sometimes the improbability, the idea of making the same angle on the glass and so on, and making a very high quality pizza cutter. Strangely, a product like this is not just a thing for cutting pizza. It's also a gift because it's such good quality, and it's worthwhile making it properly with good materials. And it's that kind of thing that makes a good thing worthwhile. I'm not so keen on bird tables and things like that, but somehow being able to express these aesthetics is very strong. All of these are very old. The cost in molding here is tiny because it's been produced in 50 million examples. But it's a good example also of what Anthony said. You'll never make money out of good design. The designer got almost no cash. But from the old brands, new brands are taking over as well. LITEON speakers, watches, Skyen, which you know, all of them apparently global brands. Look at the colors as well. Crowdfunding is something which is coming in, will make it much easier to put designs onto the market. And I don't want to say too much about that. And here are just some examples of ways the same idea has been used for Scandinavian design within Taiwan. LEDs don't have to be little dots, and they don't have to be straight. And I think that's the end. Who is the end? And you can't read that, it's so light. So, as you can see, what I wanted to say was, Scandinavian design is taken from Scandinavia. The design is taken from the landscape, the geography, the atmosphere, the sky. All of these things you've got in Taiwan as well. Beautiful landscape, sky, it's a green island, Islas Formosa. You've got all the ingredients here. You could take examples from abroad, you could filter it through your culture and really express a new design for Taiwan using imagination, using innovation, and using inventiveness. Thank you very much.